This diagram shows a basic workflow of planning and developing a search for a systematic review. The process starts with planning and initial communication. This progresses to search development and is then followed by the test phase, running the searches, and ends with supplementary search methods. The planning and initial communication stage is crucial for making sure you're designing a search that meets all the criteria it needs to and is appropriate for the project. This is referred to as a period of initial communication in order to emphasise that communication with the review team is important throughout all the stages of the searching process. As an overview of this stage, it is at this point you might want to consider: what are the search concepts for the research question? You might use a framework such as PICO to map this out. Are there any justified limits or further inclusion or exclusion criteria for the searches? This would be things like year limits or language limits. Which are the most useful databases and sources for this information? You might want to think about databases for specific study types, such as systematic review databases, databases for specific subjects, such as economics databases, as well as sources for ongoing or unpublished studies like clinical trial registries. You might also want to consider: how much time is there for the project, and how many references are too many? This might vary with the methods used in the project. So, for example, a project using machine learning to screen papers could handle a much larger number of references than a review team sifting manually. Once you've discussed and understood the criteria for the searches, you're ready to start developing a search strategy. It's useful to use PICO to decide on the key concepts you're using in your strategy. PICO stands for Population, Intervention, Comparators and Outcomes, and this is a framework to identify the concepts of the search. You might want to develop a search strategy just for one database to start with, so that you can test it out and evaluate any refinements needed. This involves using the subject headings for the database. As an example, Ovid Medline uses MESH subject headings and Ovid Embase uses Emtree subject headings. Use free text terms and search for these in appropriate or relevant search fields, for example the title and abstract. Make sure your free text terms use the most effective database search syntax to retrieve the papers you need. Search syntax varies by database, and these are characters which allow you to do things like truncating your terms to pick up additional relevant words, searching for terms close to other terms within a certain number of words, or searching for additional characters within a word. Use the Boolean operators, which are and, or, and not, to combine the concepts of your search together and to broaden or narrow the results as needed. Then self-review your search or have it peer-reviewed and revise it as necessary. In the next phase, you would test your strategy and report on the performance for the database you've chosen. You might want to think about the following together with a review team. Does the search pick up relevant material, including key papers? You would have to make sure the papers you're after are on the database first, and then check to see if the strategy has retrieved them. You would consider if you need to revise any aspects of the search. For example, if any key papers have been missed, you would examine the strategy to find out why. Once your strategy has been refined and revised, you would translate it for use on other databases and adapt it as necessary to ensure it is appropriate for each resource. As an example, Cochrane Central is a database of RCTs, so you wouldn't need the RCT concept represented in your strategy. Once you've translated your strategy for other databases, you would report on the total number of hits across all the databases and assess whether this figure is manageable. But it's important to keep in mind that deduplication could remove between 20 to 40% of references. Before you run the searches, you might need to update your protocol to ensure it is consistent with the searches you're going to run. Then when you run the searches, you'll want to document them in full so that they are reproducible. This would include details of each strategy, the database and platform, the number of hits per line and overall, and the date of the search. Next, you would download the records into bibliographic or citation management software, something like EndNote for instance, and deduplicate the records. And once that's done, you would write up the full process of designing the searches, including any details of rerunning your searches for updated results. The final phase is performing any of the following supplementary search methods and documenting these in your search write-up. Hand searching. This means searching through any key journals or conference proceedings which are not indexed in electronic databases. Forwards or backwards citation searching are two different processes. This is where, for specific papers only, you would look beyond a paper's publication date to see where the article has been cited, or look backwards at all of the cited references for an individual article. Contacting authors of eligible studies included in your review where the reporting isn't clear or you require additional information.